She paid with her hands before her mind caught up. Her fingers were already digging into her apron pocket, past the pen, past the folded receipt from yesterday, past the 2 Tylenol she'd been saving for the headache that never fully left. Before she even processed what she was about to do. The store had gone the specific kind of quiet that happens when strangers collectively hold their breath. The man at Register 4 stood with his jacket pockets turned out like empty mouths, his face flushed with the particular shame that only comes from being made a spectacle in front of people who don't know your name. And the woman 3 people back, the one with the designer bag and the voice engineered to carry, was still talking, still performing, still sweeping her arm toward the man like he was evidence of something. Some of us have been standing here for 20 minutes. Some of us have actual money. The cashier, Zara Obi, 29 years old, 2 jobs, 1 child, a mother dying slowly in Enugu, smoothed a crumpled $20 bill onto the counter and looked nowhere but straight ahead. "I'll cover it," she said. Quiet, final. "This is my money, not the store's." The store stayed silent. The man in the worn jacket looked at her, and something behind his eyes, something that had been locked for a very long time, shifted. Nobody in that store knew who he was yet. Nobody knew what the next 6 weeks would cost each of them. Nobody knew that this moment, Register 4, FreshMart, a Tuesday afternoon in late October, would become the single most documented, most replayed, most argued about 23 seconds in the history of their ordinary lives. A days woke at exactly 5:15, no matter a days woke at exactly 5:15 no matter what. And Zara needed those 28 minutes, needed them the way she needed water. Needed them to sit in the dark of their 1-bedroom apartment in Decatur, Georgia, with her cup of Lipton tea going cold in her hands, and remind herself of the math. The math was always the same. It never got easier. She did it anyway. $1,340. That was rent. Due the 1st of every month. No grace period, no negotiation. The landlord, Mr. Otieno, a fellow Nigerian who had lived in America long enough to forget what struggling looked like, had told her once, "I like you, Zara, but business is business." She had smiled and said she understood. She did understand. She just wished understanding paid the bills. $280. A Daisy's daycare, a place called Little Stars on Glenwood Avenue, run by a Ghanaian woman named Mrs. Mpansa, who sometimes let Zara pay 3 days late without charging the fee. This was the closest thing Zara had to grace in her financial life. $180. The Western Union transfer to Enugu every month. For her mother, Ngozi, who had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 2 years ago and whose insulin cost more than the Nigerian government cared to admit. Some months, Zara sent $200. Those were the months she ate once a day. $90. The prepaid phone that was her lifeline, to the daycare, to her second job, to the weekly WhatsApp call with her mother, where she told Ngozi everything was fine, and Ngozi pretended to believe her. What remained after rent, daycare, the transfer, and the phone was the number Zara worked her way back from every morning in the dark. Some months, it was $310. Some months, $180. This month, the month of the man with the empty pockets, it was $147. That was everything. Everything until the 15th. Job 1. FreshMart on Flat Shoals Road, Southeast Atlanta. Cashier. Minimum wage, $10.10 an hour. Weekdays, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. She'd worked there for 2.5 years. Her manager, a sweating man named Gerald, who wore short-sleeved dress shirts regardless of weather, had told her twice that she was the most reliable person he'd ever hired. He had never once offered her a raise. Job 2. Gold Leaf Medical Center. Housekeeping. 4 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. 4 nights a week. The hospital smelled like ammonia and something underneath the ammonia that Zara had learned not to think about. She mopped floors on the 3rd and 4th floors. Sometimes patients called out to her from beds and she'd stop and listen because she was the kind of person who stopped and listened. This made her slower than the other housekeepers. She had never been written up for it. Addis was 4 years old and had her father's eyes, dark, watchful, always slightly amused, and his complete absence otherwise. He had been gone since Zara was 6 months pregnant. Back to Lagos, he said. Back to his other life, she later understood. She did not hate him. Hatred required energy she couldn't spare. She felt something quieter about him. A low, sound tired. I'm okay, Mama. You sound tired. I'm okay, Mama. You always say okay. Tell me the truth. The truth is, I'm okay, Mama. Adace drew a horse today. It looks like a dog, but she says it's a horse. Her mother would laugh, and Zara would hold the phone tight and close her eyes, and for 30 seconds, she was not in a 1-bedroom apartment in Decatur, with $147 to her name. She was in Enugu, in the yellow kitchen, and the yam soup was on the stove, and everything was temporary, and everything was fine. Then Sunday ended, and Monday was the alarm at 4:47. The $20 in Zara's apron on the morning of October 14th was her lunch money for 4 days. She had packed it specifically because the break room vending machine had been restocked with the small bags of plantain chips she liked, and she had promised herself a small promise, the kind of promise you make to the self that is running out of small joys, that she would buy one every day this week. She did not buy a single one, because a man in a worn jacket forgot his wallet. Or said he did, and Zara Obi, who had $47 in her checking account, and a sick mother in Nigeria, and a 4-year-old who drew horses that looked like dogs, reached into her apron pocket without being asked. FreshMart on Flat Shoals Road was the kind of grocery store that knew its customers, not the way a boutique knows its regulars, not by name, not with warm greetings, the way a neighborhood knows itself. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a frequency that had become background music. The produce section smelled of something almost fresh. The shopping carts had that one wobbly wheel that announced you from 3 aisles away. There was a bulletin board near the entrance where people pinned handwritten cards, apartments for rent, church announcements, a babysitter available Tuesdays and Thursdays, a lost cat named Solomon, last seen near the parking lot. On Tuesday afternoons, it was always crowded. The after-work crowd had not yet arrived, but the retired men and the mothers with strollers and the people on the bus schedule who had to time their shopping to the 2:47. All of them arrived at roughly the same time, between 1:30 and 2:15. And all 5 registers would fill up, and Gerald would appear from his office with the particular look of a man who is perpetually one customer complaint from a breakdown. Zara had been on register 4 since 6 that morning. 8 hours. Her feet had stopped sending protest signals around hour 5. They had accepted their situation with a grim resignation she respected. She had processed 214 transactions since her shift began. She knew this because the register kept count, and she checked it sometimes when the line slowed. Not because she was proud of the number, but because it was something concrete in a day that otherwise blurred into conveyor belt and beep, and do you have your loyalty card, and paper or plastic, until the whole thing felt like a dream you couldn't wake from. She was 30 minutes from the end of her shift when he walked up. She noticed him the way she noticed everyone, quickly, professionally, with the practiced assessment of someone who has learned that the first 3 seconds of an interaction tell you almost everything. He was Korean, she thought, mid-40s, maybe older, wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. Not ill-fitting the way cheap clothes don't fit, but ill-fitting the way expensive clothes look when a man has worn them down deliberately. The jacket was brown suede, soft, the kind that costs more than it looks. But it was old, worn at the elbows. His khaki pants were creased wrong. The crease of someone who had dressed quickly, rather than the crease of someone who couldn't afford an iron. His basket had 6 items: rice, dried black beans, sesame oil, a bag of onions, the 2 limes, the staples of someone who knew how to cook from nothing. "Good afternoon," Zara said. He looked up. His eyes were dark, not the dark of emotion, but the dark of someone who had trained themselves out of showing any. Cold eyes, not unkind, just sealed. "Good afternoon," he said. His accent was light, Korean underneath American, the accent of someone who had lived here long enough to almost lose it. She scanned his items: rice, beans, oil, onions, limes. "Cooking tonight?" She made conversation with everyone. It was policy, but also she meant it. She was interested in what people cooked. A pause. "Doenjang jjigae, my grandmother's recipe." "Is that a soup?" "A stew, fermented soybean. You'd either love it or hate it." "My mother makes ogbono. Most people hate it until they try it twice." Something shifted in his face, or still. Behind him, the line was 4 still. Behind him, the line was 4 people deep. The woman directly behind him, late 40s, silk blouse, Chanel bag that Zara had clocked immediately as real, had been on her phone since she got in line. She lowered it now. "Is there a problem?" The man's jaw tightened. "I believe I've left my wallet at home. I apologize. I'll step aside." "Yes, please. Some of us have places to be." The woman said it the way people say things they've been rehearsing. Too smooth, too ready. She hadn't even waited for him to finish his sentence. He began moving his basket. Gerald materialized from nowhere, the way Gerald always materialized during anything that might become an incident. "Sir, if you're unable to pay at this time..." He said he'd step aside. The woman again, louder now, aware of her audience. "Though, honestly, it's not like this is complicated. If you can't pay, don't shop." A mother with a stroller, 2 people back, looked away. The elderly man directly behind the woman in the silk blouse shook his head. Slowly, quietly, the specific headshake of someone who has learned that speaking up costs more than it's worth. The man in the brown jacket had his basket in his hand. His face was a wall, nothing on it, nothing at all, but his hands. His hands, Zara noticed, were shaking. Slightly, not from anger. She'd seen anger. This was something else, something older. Something that had to do with being made small in public, and knowing there was no correct response. She reached into her apron. "I'll pay for it." She said it the way she said most things, flat, factual, without theater. She smoothed the 20 on the counter, dug in her pocket for the 84 cents. A dime, 3 pennies, a quarter, 2 nickels, 4 more pennies. She lined them up. "This is my money," she said, looking at Gerald. "Not the store's." Gerald looked at the money, looked at the line, made the calculation that this was the path of least resistance, and nodded. "Excuse me." The woman in the silk blouse stepped forward. "You don't need to do that. He can go get his wallet and come back." Zara slid the money into the register. "He's already here. His groceries are already scanned." "That's really not your problem to solve." "I know." Zara began bagging his items. "Well, that's why I'm choosing to solve it." The store was very quiet. The man in the brown jacket was watching her the way people watch something they don't have a category for. She handed him his bag. "Here you go, sir. Have a good evening." He took the bag. His mouth opened, closed. "Why?" he said. It wasn't really a question. It was more like a word that had escaped before he could stop it. Zara shrugged. You needed groceries. I had money, that's all. That was your lunch money. She blinked. How do you know that? Because you took it from your apron pocket. Not your wallet, not your bag. Your apron pocket. That's where people keep what they need for the day. She looked at him for a moment, looked at the way he held himself. Straight, controlled, like a man who had spent decades being unreadable and had perfected it. Then I'll eat light today, she said. It happens. He nodded. Once, and walked toward the exit. The woman in the silk blouse looked at Zara the way people look at things they find bewildering and slightly threatening. That was a waste, she said. Next customer, said Zara. If you're new to this channel, welcome to Afro-Korean series. You've arrived at the right story. If you've been here before, you know what's coming is not what you expect. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next part of this story will make everything you know make a different kind of sense. His name was Sung-Jin Kwon. He was 47 years old, the chairman of KSW Capital Group, a private investment holding company with $4.2 billion in assets under management, offices in Seoul, Singapore, and a discreet suite on the 42nd floor of a building in Midtown Atlanta that most people in Atlanta had never been to and would not recognize by name. He did not appear in Forbes. He had made sure of that. He did not attend charity galas, did not sit on hospital boards, did not name buildings after himself. He gave money the way some people pray, quietly, consistently, without requiring an audience. His foundation had funded 17 schools in South Korea's rural provinces. Nobody who attended those schools knew his name. He had come to Atlanta 14 years ago to manage a real estate acquisition and never left. Not because Atlanta charmed him. He was not a man who was easily charmed, but because it was useful. The city was growing. Money was moving. And he could operate here below the surface of a world that was too busy watching New York and Los Angeles to notice what was being built in the margins. His driver and head of security was a man named Jae-won Park, 38, who had been with Kwon for 11 years and understood that his job was not merely logistics, but discretion. Jae-won drove a black Hyundai Genesis when Kwon wanted to move without comment and said nothing about the grocery store experiment when Kwon had explained it 3 days ago. He had simply asked, "Which store?" And when Kwon told him, he had said, "I'll wait in the lot," and that was the end of the conversation. This was why Kwon kept him. The experiment had been Kwon's idea, born out of a conversation with his younger sister Minjung, who lived in Seoul and called every other Sunday, and who had said something to him 6 weeks ago that had lodged in his chest like a splinter he couldn't reach. "You don't know anyone real anymore," she'd said. Not harshly. Minjung was never harsh. She said things the way you press a bruise to see if it still hurts. Everyone around you has a reason to be nice to you. I worry that you've forgotten what the other kind of nice looks like. He had told her she was being dramatic. She had laughed and said that was how she knew she was right. He had thought about it for a week, 2 weeks, 6 weeks. On October 14th, he had asked Jae-won to drop him 2 blocks from a grocery store on Flat Shoals Road, and he had walked in with 6 items and no wallet, and waited to see what the world looked like from the bottom of it. He had not expected the woman in the silk blouse. She was not a surprise. He had encountered her type his entire life, in boardrooms and restaurants and country clubs. The kind of person who performs their social position for any available audience. The performance did not interest him. What he had not expected was the cashier. Not the act itself. Acts of generosity happened. He had funded enough of them to know. What he had not expected was the quality of it. The way she hadn't looked at him with pity. the way she hadn't made an announcement of it. The way she had argued with Gerald about it being her money, not the store's, which was a distinction that mattered. A distinction that told him she understood the difference between charity administered by institution and choice made by self. And then the 28 cents, the coins, was possibly a sacrifice. The coins was possibly a sacrifice. The coins were definitely a commitment. He sat in the back of the Genesis and looked at his hands. "You want me to run the plates on the other woman?" Jaewon asked from the front seat. He had watched through the store window. He always watched. "No." "The cashier?" A pause. "Yes?" Jaewon nodded. The car moved into traffic. Sung Jin Kwon looked out the window at the ordinary street and thought about a woman who kept coins in her apron in case someone needed them. He tried to remember the last time he had done anything that cost him something he couldn't replace. He tried to remember and could not. Well, this bothered him more than he expected. Jaewon's report arrived at 9 o'clock the next morning. It was 4 pages. Kwon read it at his desk, standing, the way he always read things that required his full attention. Zara Adayezi Obi, age 29. Born in Enugu, Enugu State, Nigeria. Legal permanent resident, green card issued 2018. Arrived on a student visa in 2016 to attend Georgia Perimeter College, now Georgia State University Perimeter College, pursuing a nursing degree. No degree completed. He paused here. Read it twice. No degree completed. The report continued. In 2019, pregnant and unmarried, she had left school with 2 semesters remaining. She had been working at FreshMart since 2021. She picked up the second job at Gold Leaf Medical Center in 2022, 6 weeks after her mother's diabetes diagnosis. She was sending $180 to $200 monthly to Ngozi Obi, 61, Enugu. She had not been to Nigeria in 3 years. Her daughter's name was Adaze, 4 years old, enrolled at Little Stars Early Learning Center on Glenwood Avenue. No criminal record, no debt beyond a $2,400 balance on a secured credit card. Her checking account, Jaewon had not obtained this legally, and Kwon noted it without comment, held $47. Her next paycheck from FreshMart was in 4 days. He set the report down. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his 42nd floor office and looked at Atlanta spread beneath him. The highways, the construction cranes, the neighborhoods that had been poor when he arrived and were still poor, despite everything that had been built around them. They sometimes because of it, and thought about a woman on a $47 balance who had given away her lunch money without hesitation. He thought about something his grandmother used to say in the kitchen in Busan when he was 7 years old and watching her make doenjang jjigae with the careful attention of someone who understood that food was information about the people who made it. Siram daun, saram eun, bi eun, sonur o junda. A truly generous person gives from an empty hand. He had heard this his whole life. He had thought he understood it. He had funded hospitals and schools and scholarship programs for 20 years and told himself it was generosity. Standing at his window with Jaewon's 4-page report on his desk, it occurred to him that he had never once given from an empty hand. He had given from the overflow, from the surplus, from the part of his wealth that would not be missed. He had made a career of calculated giving. Zara Obi had given the only $20 she had for 4 days, on a Tuesday afternoon. To a stranger she thought was broke. It was not the same thing. He understood now that it was not the same thing at all. "Sir." Jaewon stood at the door. He was the only person who entered without knocking. "The Mercer Street acquisition. Chen's office called. They need the LOI by 5. Send it. You haven't reviewed the final terms. Send it, Jaewon." Jaewon looked at the report on the desk, said nothing, left. Kwon looked at Atlanta for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called his sister in Seoul. "You were right," he said when she answered. A pause. Then Minjung, quietly. "About what?" "About the other kind of nice. I found it." "Already?" "It found me." Another pause. When Minjung spoke again, she was careful. She was always careful with him. Had been since they were children, since she had learned that pushing her brother directly got you nowhere, and that you had to come at him from an angle. "What are you going to do?" Kwon looked at the report, at the $47, at the name Adaez, at the number $180 every month to a woman dying slowly in Enugu. "I don't know yet," he said, "but something real." "Sungjin." His sister's voice went very quiet. "Don't make it about money." He didn't answer. "Promise me?" Minjung again. "Don't make it about money." "I'll think about it." "That means you're going to make it about money." He almost smiled. Almost. The seal held. "I'll think about it," he said again and hung up. The woman in the silk blouse was named Vanessa Rowe. She was 46, district operations director for a luxury beauty supply chain called Oriel Cosmetics. 12 stores across Georgia and Tennessee, $3.2 million in annual revenue under her management. She drove a leased Mercedes C-Class that she referred to as her car. She lived in a townhouse in Sandy Springs that she referred to as her home. She wore the silk blouse. There were 4 of them, variations on a theme, all from the same Buckhead boutique, because she had decided at 38 that silk said something money said differently, and she wanted to say both things simultaneously. She had been in FreshMart on Flat Shoals Road because the Whole Foods on Ponce de Leon was being renovated, and she needed grocery service without the inconvenience of being inconvenienced. She had pulled into the FreshMart parking lot with the specific energy of a person doing somewhere beneath them a temporary favor. She had not thought about the man with the empty pockets again after leaving the store, or so she told herself. But that evening, in her townhouse in Sandy Springs, she had told her friend Trish about it on the phone and heard herself describe the cashier with a word she did not examine carefully enough. Strange. She was just strange, paid for some man she didn't know. With her lunch money, apparently. Strange. Trish had laughed. Probably wanted attention. "Right," Vanessa said. "That's what I thought." She had felt better after that. She had eaten her dinner and watched television and slept well, and that was Tuesday. Wednesday, she received the first DM. It was from an account called at ATL Newsflash, and 72,000 followers, which had posted a 15-second clip from someone's phone. Shot from behind the bakery display, slightly blurry, but clear enough. The clip showed Zara reaching into her apron. It showed Vanessa's face and open gesture when she said, "Some of us have actual money." It showed the quiet of the store. The caption read, "Cashier uses her lunch money to pay for a stranger? The woman behind him?" By Wednesday evening, it had 800,000 views. By Thursday morning, 4.2 million. By Thursday noon, Vanessa Rowe was a trending topic on X under the hashtag #SilkBlouseKaren. Her name had been identified from her Oriel Cosmetics corporate profile, still public, despite everything, by 11 a.m. Her employer's main account began receiving messages at 11:07. By 2 p.m., the Oriel Cosmetics PR department had called her 3 times. She had not answered. By 4 o'clock, they stopped calling and sent an email from legal. Vanessa read the email standing in her kitchen in Sandy Springs, still in her work clothes, her silk blouse suddenly feeling very thin. The email was 3 paragraphs. The third paragraph contained the phrase "in light of recent events" and the associated reputational impact. The fourth paragraph, which she had miscounted, used the word termination. She sat down on her kitchen floor. Not the chair, the floor. She sat on her kitchen floor in her silk blouse with her leased Mercedes in the driveway and her rented townhouse quiet around her, and she thought about a grocery store line on a Tuesday afternoon and a cashier who had paid for a stranger's groceries with $20.84. And she thought, I should have said nothing. I should have been quiet. I should have let it pass. But the thought underneath that thought, the one she was less willing to look at directly, was something harder. Something about why she had spoken at all. Something about the man in the worn jacket and what she had assumed about him in the first 3 seconds, and why those assumptions had felt, in the moment, like facts. She sat on the kitchen floor for a long time. Outside, her leased Mercedes sat in the driveway going nowhere. He came back on Friday, not to the store. He didn't go back to the store. He sent Jaewon. Jaewon walked into FreshMart at 10:30 a.m., between the morning rush and the lunch crowd, when the store was quiet enough to have a conversation. He was dressed down, dark jeans, a plain gray sweater, the kind of face that people looked at and then looked away from because it gave them nothing to hold on to. He was good at this. It was one of the reasons Kwon paid him what he paid him. He bought a bottle of water and a banana and went through Zara's register because she was the only cashier working and because that was the point. She scanned his items. $2.17. He paid, and then, unhurried, he said, "My employer would like to apologize for Tuesday." Zara looked up. "The man with the groceries," Jaewon continued. "He's asked me to give you this." He placed a small white envelope on the counter. Zara looked at the envelope, looked at Jaewon. "Who's your employer?" "He'd prefer to tell you himself, if you're willing to meet." "I paid $20 for a stranger's groceries. I don't need an apology for that." "He knows. Hey, he'd like to meet anyway." "Why?" Jaewon paused. He had been instructed on what to say here, and he had thought, privately, that the instruction was unusual. Kwon did not typically explain himself to people he was attempting to help. The explanation itself was new. "He said to tell you," Jaewon said carefully, "that you did something that reminded him of a person he used to be, and he'd like to understand how you still are that person." The line behind Jaewon had grown by one, an elderly man with a cart of soup cans who was watching this exchange with undisguised interest. Zara looked at the envelope. She didn't touch it. "There's no money in there," Jaewon said. "He specifically told me to tell you that." "Because he thought I'd refuse if there was money in it?" "Yes." She looked at Jaewon for a moment, one of those looks that assess the whole architecture of a person quickly and without mercy. Then she picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside was a business card. Thick stock, no logo, just a name, a phone number, and 4 words below it. She read the 4 words, read them again. She put the card in her apron pocket, the same pocket, and looked at Jaewon. "Tell him I'll think about it." Jaewon nodded, took his water and his banana, and left. The elderly man with the soup cans rolled his cart forward. "What did the card say?" he asked, the way old men ask things, directly, without the cushion of pretense. Zara smiled. First real smile of the day. It said, "Not a favor, not charity, just coffee." The old man nodded slowly. "That's either very honest or very good at sounding honest." "That's what I'm trying to figure out," said Zara. $2.17, sir." She called the number on a Sunday, not because she had decided, because Adiz had fallen asleep early and the apartment was quiet, in the specific way that made Zara's thoughts loud, and she had taken the card out of her apron. She had transferred it to the pocket of her houseclothes when she got home Friday, without thinking about why, and sat with it on the edge of the couch. She had told exactly one person about the envelope. Her friend, Obi Ageli. Obi, who worked nights at a call center in Dunwoody and called Zara every Sunday morning on her break. Obi had listened to the whole thing and then said, "Zara." A man in a worn jacket sent a driver in a gray sweater to give you a business card that says, "Just coffee." Either this is the beginning of a movie or the beginning of a crime. "Probably both," Zara had said. "So don't go." "I haven't decided yet." "That means you're going." Obi knew her too well. This was the problem with people who knew you too well. She called the number at 8:14 p.m. He answered on the second ring. Not his assistant. Him. His voice was the same as in the store. Controlled, unhurried, with that light accent underneath American, like a river under ice. He said, "Miss Obi." Not a question. He had been expecting her. "How did you know it was me?" "This number is on one card. I gave out one card." A pause. She processed this. "You gave your personal number to a grocery store cashier?" "Yes." "Why?" A long pause on his end. The kind that wasn't hesitation, was deliberation. She would learn to tell the difference. "Because I wanted you to be able to reach me directly, not through a system, not through J1, directly." "Why does that matter?" "Because everything I'm proposing," he said, "should be your choice, not a process. Your choice, and choices require direct access." She sat with that. It was, she thought, either a very sophisticated manipulation or a very sincere principle. She had not yet developed the equipment to tell which. "What are you proposing?" she asked. "Right now, coffee, that's all." The card said not charity, not a favor. "Correct. Then what is it?" Another deliberate pause. "A conversation between two people who don't owe each other anything. That's rarer than it sounds." She almost laughed. Didn't. "I have a daughter. I'm 4 years old. I work 2 jobs. I don't have time to be someone's lesson in humility." "I know," he said quietly. "I know about your daughter. I know about both jobs. I know about your mother in Enugu." The silence that followed was a different kind. Colder. "You investigated me?" "Yes." He didn't soften it, didn't apologize, just stated it the way he stated everything, as a fact that existed and would continue to exist regardless of how it was received. "I wanted to understand who you were before I approached you. I don't do things without information. You could have just not approached me." "I could have." "So why didn't you?" The longest pause yet. She counted 4 seconds. "Because," he said, "what you did in that store was the most honest thing I've witnessed in 11 years of living in this city. And I am in a business where honesty is so rare, it has become unrecognizable to most people in it, including, for a long time, to me." Zara looked at her sleeping daughter through the cracked bedroom door. Adaz's arm was thrown over the edge of the bed, fingers curled, utterly trusting of gravity and the world. "1 coffee," Zara said. "Tuesday. I have a break at 2:15, 30 minutes. You come to me. There's a place called Alma's 2 blocks from the store. You don't send your driver. You come yourself." "Agreed. And if you're late, I leave." "I won't be late." She hung up, sat in the quiet apartment, looked at the card in her hand. She had expected to feel apprehensive. She felt something else, something that sat lower in the chest, steadier. Not safety, Not quite. When the feeling you get when something you've been bracing for finally stops pretending it isn't coming. She put the card in the drawer with Adaise's immunization records. She didn't examine why she put it there. She went to bed. She didn't sleep for a long time. He was already there when she arrived. This was the first surprise. She had expected to arrive first, to have the advantage of choosing the table, of being settled before he walked in, of holding the room from a position of composure. Instead, she pushed open the door of Alma's, a narrow place, 8 tables, the smell of jollof rice and groundnut soup from the kitchen in the back, a television on the wall playing Nigerian news with the sound low. And he was at the corner table, no phone on the table, no laptop, nothing. Just him and 2 cups of coffee already poured. He had researched the place, of course he had. He was wearing different clothes than the store, dark trousers, a clean white shirt, no jacket. Simpler than she'd expected for a man of whatever he was. He stood when she came in, old-fashioned. She noted it. "You did research," she said, sitting down. No greeting. She was on a 30-minute break, and she had decided not to waste any of it on performance. "Alma's has the best groundnut soup in Southeast Atlanta," he said. "I also confirmed it's owned by a woman from a B estate who's been here 22 years. I thought you might be comfortable here." "You thought correctly." She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. It was good coffee. She noted that too. "What's your name?" He looked at her steadily. "You don't know?" The card had initials and a number. SK. "I didn't look you up." Something crossed his face. Not quite surprise. The recalibration of someone who had prepared for a certain kind of conversation and discovered the map was wrong. "Sungjin Kwan." "What do you do, Sungjin Kwan?" "Capital investment, private equity, real estate acquisition." "How much are you worth?" He paused. People don't usually ask that directly. "I'm on a 30-minute break. I don't have time to get there indirectly." The not quite smile again. "More than I need." "That's not a number." "No?" She let it go. It didn't matter. The number wasn't the point. "Why the grocery store?" she said. "Why the empty wallet? Why the whole performance?" "My sister told me I'd forgotten what honest people looked like. I wanted to find one." "In a grocery store." "Where else? Who people actually are." Zara looked at who people actually are. Zara looked at him for a long moment. "You ran an experiment on real people without their consent." "Yes." "That bothers you." She said it as an observation, not a question, because it was on his face. Buried, controlled, but there. "You're not sure it was the right thing to do." He was quiet for a moment. "No, I'm not sure." This surprised her more than anything else he could have said. She had expected certainty. Men with his kind of money were usually very certain. "Why are you telling me that?" "Because you asked directly, and I'm trying," he said, with a precision that told her this was a recent decision rather than an old habit. To answer direct questions directly." She drank her coffee. The television on the wall showed flooding in Lagos. The sound was still low. "What do you want from me?" Zara asked. "Nothing." Men with $4 billion don't sit in groundnut soup restaurants in Southeast Atlanta because they want nothing. He looked at her, the sealed eyes, the control. And this was the moment she would return to for months afterward, examining it from different angles. Something cracked, not wide open, a hairline fracture, the kind that, once started, does not stop. "I want to understand," he said, "how you did what you did. In that store, with $47 in your account and a sick mother overseas and a 4-year-old at home. He paused. I have given away more money than most people will see in 10 lifetimes. I have never once felt what I felt watching you give away $20. I want to understand the difference. Zara set her cup down. The television showed Lagos flooding. The groundnut soup smell drifted from the kitchen. Outside on Flat Shoals Road, a truck went past, and the windows shook slightly. There's no secret, she said. He was embarrassed. He needed food. I had money. That's the whole thing. It's not the whole thing. It is. You've skipped meals for your daughter. Your mother is dying, and you can't afford to fly home to see her. You have $47, and you gave half of it to a stranger. That is not just the thing. That is a specific kind of person. I'm asking how you became that person. The silence stretched. Outside, the truck was gone. The road was quiet. My mother, Zara said finally. She used to say, the hand that is always closed has nothing to offer and nothing to receive. I watched her prove it my whole childhood. She had nothing. She shared everything. People came to our house, and she fed them even when there was only enough for us. She paused. I used to think that was foolish. Then I grew up and understood it was the only way she stayed human. Sungjin Kwan looked at the table, at his coffee cup, at his hands. My grandmother said something similar, he said quietly. A truly generous person gives from an empty hand. Your grandmother was right. I know, I just forgot it. 28 minutes had passed. Zara pushed back her chair. I have to get back. He nodded, didn't try to extend it, didn't make an offer, didn't produce a check or a proposal or a plan. He just nodded. Inside the seal who was trying, imperfectly, to crack it from the inside. Don't do anything, she said. Whatever you're thinking of doing, for me, for my daughter, for my mother. Don't, not yet. Come back and talk to me first. He held her gaze. Agreed. She left. Back to register 4. The afternoon rush. 247 more transactions before her shift ended. She did not buy a plantain chip from the vending machine, but she thought about the coffee at Alma's twice, 3 times, and each time what she thought about was not the money, or the power, or the mystery of him. She thought about a man who had everything and had forgotten his grandmother's voice, and had come looking for it in a grocery store on Flat Shoals Road. She thought, I know that kind of hunger. It has nothing to do with food. There are things a 4-page background report cannot tell you. It can tell you a bank balance, a work history, a legal status. It can tell you that a woman sends $180 a month to Nigeria and has a daughter named Adaze and a secured credit card with a $2,400 balance. It can give you the architecture of a life from the outside. What it cannot tell you is what happened in August 2019 at Georgia Perimeter College in a meeting with a financial aid counselor named Dr. Reginald Moss. What it cannot tell you is what Dr. Moss said to Zara when she was 6 months pregnant and 2 semesters from a nursing degree, and what Zara said back. What it cannot tell you is that the file from that meeting, a formal grievance Zara had submitted, a 40-page document she had assembled over 3 months with dates and witnesses and records, still existed in a university administrative archive, unresolved, because the resolution process had been stalled and then buried and then, for Zara, made practically impossible by the simple math of a woman who worked 2 jobs and raised a child alone and did not have the hours to fight an institution. The grievance alleged that Dr. Moss had made Zara's continued enrollment contingent on a relationship she had not sought and would not accept. That when she refused, her financial aid package, a combination of federal grants and an institutional scholarship that covered 92% of her tuition, had been quietly restructured. An error, the university said when she raised it. A recalculation. Appeals were available but required in-person hearings during hours she worked. She had been 2 semesters from a nursing degree. She had a daughter now. She had 2 jobs. She had $147 left this month. This is what the 4-page report missed. Kwan found it on a Wednesday morning, 2 weeks after Alma's, after their second coffee, after a conversation about her mother's insulin and his grandmother's kitchen, and the specific loneliness of building things in a country that doesn't know your name. He found it because he had made the mistake of asking Jae-won to update the background file. Not to investigate, to update, to fill in the gaps that 4 pages had left open. Jae-won put the updated report on his desk at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday and said nothing except, "Page 2. Halfway down." Kwan read it standing, the way he read things that mattered. He read it twice. He put the report down and stood at the window for 11 minutes. Jae-won, who had worked for him long enough to understand the geometry of his silences, waited by the door without speaking. Then Kwan said, "Is Moss still at the university?" "Associate Dean for Student Financial Services," Jae-won said. "Promoted in 2021. The silence that followed was a different kind than the ones before it. It was not deliberation. It was the silence of a man whose temperature had changed and who was managing the change with everything he had. "Does she know you updated the file?" "No." "Does she know you have a file on her at all?" "You told her, during the first phone call." "I told her I'd had her investigated. I didn't tell her the scope." Kwan turned from the window. His face was a wall. It was always a wall. But his jaw was set in a way that Jae-won recognized and respected and was quietly relieved was not aimed at him. "This changes things." "Sir?" Jae-won's voice was careful. "What she did in the store, on the day you ran the experiment, you need to know something." Kwan looked at him. "The month you were there," Jae-won said slowly. "The month of October. She had $147 left after bills. The $20 she gave you was from a $20 bill she had specifically set aside for something. I know, her lunch money. Not just that." Jae-won paused. This was the part he had debated including. He had included it because he was a thorough man and because he understood that his employer needed to know the full weight of what had been given. She had transferred $195 to Nigeria 2 days before. Her mother's insulin cost went up that month. She sent the extra $15 by selling a pair of earrings, gold. Her mother had given them to her before she left Enugu. The room was very quiet. "She sold her mother's earrings to cover the insulin," Kwan said. "Yes." "And 2 days later, she gave her last $20 to a stranger." "Yes." Sungjin Kwan put both hands flat on his desk. He looked at them. The hands that had built $4 billion. The hands that had given from the overflow for 20 years and called it generosity. The grandmother's voice again, unbidden. "Siram down saram yun bi yun sonyuro junda." A truly generous person gives from an empty hand. He had read those words in a report 2 weeks ago and thought he understood them. He understood them now. "I need to tell her I have this file," he said. "Sir, I need to tell her. It may end the relationship. I know." He picked up his phone. "Better it ends honestly than continues on a lie." He looked at Jae-won. "That's the lesson. I've been sitting across from her for 2 coffee meetings learning about honesty, and I've been holding a file on her life that she doesn't know the full scope of. That makes me no different than every room I've ever sat in where everyone knows more about everyone else than anyone admits." He called her. She answered on the third ring. Faint background noise, a floor buffer, a PA system. Gold Leaf Medical. She was at her second job. Miss Obi, I need to meet with you, not coffee. I need to tell you something. A pause. Then, how serious? Serious enough that I'm calling you during your shift. Another pause. The PA system in the background announced something in a flat, automated voice. Alma's, Thursday, 2:15. I'll be there. He hung up, picked up the updated report. Read page 2 again, halfway down. Dr. Reginald Moss, Associate Dean for Student Financial Services, promoted 2021. He set the report face down on his desk. He thought about Zara Obi mopping floors in a hospital at 9 p.m., 4 years after a man in an office had taken her nursing degree and her institutional scholarship and called it a recalculation. The temperature behind his eyes had not changed. It would not change for a long time. Thursday, Alma's, 2:15. He was already there. He was always already there. She sat down, looked at his face. Read it the way she read things that mattered, quickly, without mercy. Something was different. The control was still there. It was always there. But underneath it, the temperature had changed. He was carrying something. Tell me, she said. He told her about the file. The update. Page 2, halfway down. He told her in the same direct, undecorated way he told everything. No softening, no apology cushion, just the facts in sequence. He told her about Jaewon, about the scope of the original report and the scope of the updated one. He told her about Dr. Moss. She did not move. She sat with her hands around her coffee cup, and she did not move, and her face did not change, and he could not read her. He had spent 20 years reading people in rooms, and he could not read her. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, How did you get the grievance file? Jaewon has access to administrative archives. That's not legal. No, he didn't qualify it. You know about Moss. Yes. You know about the scholarship restructuring. Yes. You know I had 2 semesters left. Yes. She looked at her coffee, the television on the wall. The other 3 customers in Alma's who were not paying attention to them. The kitchen where Alma herself was probably making something that smelled of home. Do you know why I never told anyone? Her voice was even, not cold, even. The evenness of a woman who has made peace with something very hard. Because the appeals required hours you didn't have, Kwon said. That's part of it. She was quiet again, and then, the other part is that I was ashamed. I know that's not rational. Well, he was the one who did something wrong, but I was pregnant and alone and a long way from Nigeria, and I thought. She stopped, started again. I thought if I fought it and lost, I would have nothing. No degree and no dignity. At least if I just left, I chose to leave. The words landed in the room and sat there. Kwon did not speak. He understood, from a lifetime of watching powerful people shape narratives, exactly what she had just described. The calculation of a person with nothing left to lose, who chooses to preserve the one thing that cannot be taken. The story they tell themselves about their own agency. She had chosen to walk away, because walking away was still walking. Being pushed out was something else. I'm angry, she said very quietly. I want you to know that. Not at you, at him. Well, I've been angry for 4 years, and I've had nowhere to put it because I've been too busy surviving to feel it properly. You can be angry here, Kwon said. She looked at him. Something in her face shifted. Not collapse, not relief. Something smaller and more significant than either. The recognition of a person who has been carrying weight alone for so long, they had forgotten other people could see it. "What are you going to do?" she asked. And here, this is the moment the whole story turned on. Sung Jin Kwon said something that surprised both of them. "Nothing," he said. "Not yet, not without your permission, not without your direction. This is your story, Miss Obi, not mine. I have resources, I have access, but they don't belong in your life without your say." She was very still. "You could fix this in an afternoon," she said. "Yes." "You could make one call." "Yes." "But you won't. Not until you tell me to." The quiet stretched. A car passed on Flat Shoals Road. The television showed a weather map. Alma moved something heavy in the kitchen. "Why not?" Zara asked, and this was the real question. The one she had been circling since the business card, since the phone call, since the first coffee. "Why not just fix it? You have the power. You have the money. Why are you sitting here asking my permission instead of just—" She stopped. Her jaw tightened. "That's what people like you do. You decide. You act. You make things happen, and you let the people it happen to figure out how to feel about it after." He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "That's exactly what I do. That's what I've done my entire life. I see a problem, and I solve it, and I consider that sufficient." He paused. "But you're not a problem, and what happened to you is not a problem for me to solve. It's an injustice that belongs to you. The decision about what to do with it belongs to you." He leaned forward slightly. The first time, across all their conversations, that he had broken the physical formality of the way he held himself. "You taught me that," he said. "In that store. You didn't ask me if I wanted help. You didn't wait for permission, but you also didn't make it about you. You made it about what was needed. I'm trying to learn the difference." Zara Obi looked at Sung Jin Kwon for a long time. She looked at the man who had come into a grocery store with no wallet to find out what the world looked like from the bottom, and had found, instead, and something he hadn't known he was looking for. She looked at the wall around him, the control, the sealed eyes, the precision, and she saw for the first time clearly what it was made of. Not coldness, not arrogance, grief. Years of building a world in which nothing could touch him, because the things that had touched him before had left marks he hadn't known how to carry. She thought of her mother's voice. The hand that is always closed has nothing to offer and nothing to receive. She thought of a 40-page grievance in an administrative archive. 4 years, 2 jobs, the earrings she had sold. She thought of Adaizi's arm thrown over the edge of the bed, fingers curled, trusting gravity. "Okay," she said. He looked at her. "Okay," she said again, steadier. "I'm going to tell you what I want. On anything? If I find out you've made on anything? If I find out you've made a call, or sent Jaewon somewhere, or moved a single piece of this without telling me first? I walk, and I keep walking." Understood. She sat back, took a breath. Around them, Alma's was quiet and warm and smelled of groundnut soup, and the television showed a weather map, and outside on Flat Shoals Road, the ordinary afternoon continued, without knowing that something had just shifted inside this small corner of it. "First," Zara said, "we finish our coffee. Then I go back to work. Then Thursday evening, I'm going to write down everything I remember about Dr. Moss and everything in that grievance file and everything that happened. And then I'm going to bring it to you, and we're going to read it together. And then, only then, we decide what happens next." Sung Jin Kwon nodded. Something in his face, the careful architecture of it, settled into a shape that was not quite peace, but was adjacent to it. The shape of a man who has stopped trying to control the weather and started learning to read it. "Agreed," he said. They finished their coffee. She went back to register 4. He sat in Alma's for another 10 minutes after she left, looking at nothing. Then he called Jae-won. "Find everything," he said. "Every complaint filed against Moss, every student, every year. Don't act on anything. Don't approach anyone. Just find everything." "How far back?" "As far as there is." He hung up, left Alma's. Walked to his car. He had driven himself, as agreed. He sat in the parking lot on Flat Shoals Road and thought about a woman who had given her last $20 to a stranger and was still, 2 weeks later, the one setting the terms. He thought, this is what I forgot. Not generosity, not kindness. This. The understanding that power used without permission is still power used wrong. He had built $4 billion and somehow missed the most important lesson. It had taken $20.84 to find it again. She brought it on a Thursday evening, not to Alma's, to a conference room on the 42nd floor of Kwan's building in Midtown, because she had told him she wanted neutral ground, and he had pointed out, with the careful honesty that had become the grammar of their conversations, that there was no such thing as truly neutral ground when one person owned 14 buildings in the zip code. So she had said, then somewhere with a table big enough to spread papers out, and he had said, I have one of those. Jae-won met her in the lobby, rode up with her in silence. She looked at the city through the elevator's glass wall. Atlanta spread out in the late evening, all lit highways and construction cranes and the particular amber glow of a city that never fully decided whether it was done becoming something, and thought about the last time she'd been in a building this tall. Never, was the answer. She had cleaned the 3rd and 4th floors of a hospital. She had worked Register 4 at FreshMart. This was not her world. She decided that was fine. She was not here for the world. She was here for the table. Kwan was already there. Of course he was. White shirt again, dark trousers, the sleeves pushed up 2 turns at the wrist. The first time she had seen him with anything less than full formality, and it made him look, she thought, like a man who had been sitting here for a while already, working, thinking, carrying the weight of page 2 halfway down, the way she had been carrying it for 4 years. She set her bag on the table and pulled out a manila folder. Thick. The edges soft with handling. I kept a copy, she said. Of everything. Even when I stopped fighting, I kept the copy. I don't know why. You kept it, Kwan said quietly, because some part of you always knew that one day it would matter. She looked at him. Didn't argue. Opened the folder. They sat for 2.5 hours. She walked him through all of it. August 14th, 2019. Said the meeting with Dr. Moss that she had requested to discuss her aid package for the final 2 semesters. The way he had sat across from her with his hands folded on his desk and made a suggestion that she had not at first understood. The way she had understood it on the walk home. The way she had gone back the following week with a recording on her phone. The way the recording had been ruled inadmissible by the university's own review board because Georgia was a 2-party consent state, and she had not informed Moss she was recording. She walked him through the scholarship restructuring letter that arrived 6 days after she declined his suggestion. The language was impeccable, bureaucratic, airless, technically defensible. A recalculation of her eligibility based on updated enrollment criteria. She had been an A- student. She had never missed a payment deadline. The recalculation had taken 92% of her funding and left her with 3 weeks to find the difference or withdraw. She had withdrawn. She walked him through the 40-page grievance. The 3 witnesses, 2 fellow students who had heard Moss make similar comments in office hours, and 1 faculty member who had seen Zara leaving his office in tears. The faculty member had submitted a corroborating statement and then, 6 weeks later, quietly rescinded it. She never found out why. She walked him through the appeals process she had attempted twice, and both times been scheduled for hearings during her FreshMart shift, and both times been told that rescheduling was not possible without a 30-day written notice, which would move the hearing outside the appeals window, which would invalidate her claim. When she finished, the room was quiet. Kwon had not spoken for 40 minutes. He had not written anything down. He had sat with his hands flat on the table and his eyes on her face, and listened the way people listen when they are cataloging something for use, not comfort. Now he said, "The faculty member who rescinded, do you know their name?" "Professor Adeyemi, Department of Health Sciences." She paused. "He retired the following semester. I always thought the timing was—" "I'll find out why he rescinded," Kwon said. Not a promise, a statement of fact, the way he stated all facts. "There's something else," Zara said. He waited. Jaewon's updated file said Moss was promoted in 2021, but the file didn't say everything. She reached into the folder and pulled out a single sheet, printed from an email. Thus she slid it across the table. He read it. It was an email sent to Zara in November 2020 by a woman named Priscilla Addo. Priscilla had found Zara through a student advocacy group Facebook page, a page Zara had posted on once briefly before taking the post down. Priscilla's email was 4 paragraphs. In it, she described, in careful and specific language, an encounter with Dr. Reginald Moss in March 2019, 5 months before Zara's. Priscilla had also declined. Priscilla's financial aid had also been restructured. Priscilla had also been unable to return. Kwon set the email down. "There are others," Zara said. "Priscilla found 2 more after she found me. I have their names. I never did anything with them because I didn't know what to do. I didn't have the resources to do anything. I just—" She stopped. Her jaw tightened. "I collected their names, and I kept the folder, and I kept the earrings money in a separate envelope in my drawer. And I told myself one day." One day. The 2 words sat in the room between them. Sung-Jin Kwon looked at the email, at the 40-page grievance, at the woman across the table from him who had collected the evidence of an injustice for 4 years, alone, on no resources, between 2 jobs and a child and a sick mother, because she had refused to let it disappear. She hadn't fought it loudly. She had just kept the folder, like a woman who knew that one day someone would arrive with a table big enough to spread it out on. "How many?" he asked. "4 that I know of, including me." "There are more," he said. Not a guess. Jaewon's search had already returned 7 names. He had not told her yet because she had said, "Come with information, not action." He had waited. "My team found 7. The silence that followed was the heaviest of all of them. 7, Zara said. "At minimum, the search isn't complete." She put both hands flat on the table. Mirroring, without knowing it, exactly what he had done in his office when Jaewon told him about the earrings. "Okay," she said. The word was steady, quiet, final, the way the first note of something large is always quieter than what follows it. "Okay, then we do this right. All of them, not just me." "Agreed. And Kwon." He looked at her. "They have to know it was theirs. The fight has to belong to them. You understand that. Whatever you do, however you do it, they have to be the ones who said yes." He held her gaze. "I understand." "Do you?" She said it without heat, but without softness. Because you're used to solving things from a distance, writing checks, making calls, having Jae-won handle it. This is different. These are women who were made to feel like they had no power. You cannot fix that by using yours on their behalf without asking. You can only fix it by standing behind them while they use theirs. Sung Jin Kwon sat with that for a long moment. Then he said something he had said very few times in 47 years. "You're right. Tell me what to do." It took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of evenings in the conference room on the 42nd floor. 6 weeks of Zara arriving after her FreshMart shift, still in the faint smell of the store, with her folder and her notes and the names Priscilla had given her. And Kwon on the other side of the table with Jae-won's expanding file and the kind of focused, unblinking attention he usually reserved for 9-figure acquisitions. He had never applied that attention to a person before. Not like this. Not in the direction of listening rather than deciding. It changed him in ways he noticed and ways he didn't. Jae-won reached 9 women, all former students of Georgia Perimeter College between 2016 and 2021. All Black women, all on financial aid, all had encountered Dr. Reginald Moss during periods of enrollment difficulty. All had subsequently experienced aid restructuring. 6 had withdrawn. 2 had transferred to other institutions at significant financial cost. 1 had stayed and completed her degree, a fact that, when Kwon read it, stopped him cold. Because it meant she had found another way through, and he made a note that said simply, "Call her last." Contact was made carefully, not by Jae-won, by Zara and Priscilla, who had become, in those 6 weeks, something more than 2 women who had found each other on a Facebook page. Priscilla was 27, a medical billing specialist in Smyrna, sharp and direct and furious in the way that people are furious when they have been patient for too long. She was the one who made the first calls. She was the one who said, each time, "I'm not asking you to fight. I'm asking you to be seen. Whatever you want after that is yours to decide." 8 of the 9 said yes. The 9th said she needed more time. Zara said, "Take all the time you need. The door stays open." What Kwon provided was infrastructure, not a crusade, infrastructure. A law firm, Mabeck and Holloway, which specialized in Title IX and institutional discrimination cases, retained on full contingency, so no woman paid a cent. A private investigator, separate from Jae-won, with no connection to KSW Capital, to establish a clean evidentiary chain. A communications consultant to manage any press that emerged, because these women's names and faces were theirs to control, not anyone else's. And one more thing. Kwon spent 3 evenings tracking down Professor Adeyemi, who had retired to a small house in Savannah and grew tomatoes in his backyard, and had apparently spent 3 years not sleeping well. When Kwon called him, himself, not Jae-won, himself, because Zara had said, some conversations have to be personal. The professor had been quiet for a very long time. Was coming up. I had a daughter in the was coming up. I had a daughter in the same program as Miss Obi. They told me, not directly, never directly, but they told me. His voice was old and tired and ashamed, in the specific way of a man who had made a choice he knew was wrong and had been living inside it ever since. I'm sorry, it's not enough, but I'm sorry. Do you still have your original statement? Kwon asked. A long pause. Yes. Would you be willing to restore it? The longest pause of all. Savannah at the other end of the line, a retired professor in a small house with tomatoes in the backyard and 3 years of bad sleep. Yes, he said. God, yes, Kwon told Zara the next evening. He watched her face when she heard it. She didn't cry. Him yourself. He'd like to speak to you, him yourself. He'd like to speak to you, if you're willing. She thought about it. After, she said. After everything. I'll talk to him after. The case was filed on a Monday morning in January. 8 plaintiffs, 1 defendant. The complaint ran to 93 pages. It was filed in Fulton County Superior Court under the names of 8 women, in alphabetical order. Zara Obi listed last because she had asked to be listed last. "This isn't about me," she had said. "It started with me, but it was never only about me." Beck and Holloway released a statement that afternoon. Concise. 3 paragraphs, no names of funders, no mention of KSW Capital or Sungjin Kwan, on just 8 women and a complaint and a request for the court's attention. By midnight, it had been picked up by 4 Atlanta news outlets. By Tuesday morning, it was national. Vanessa Rowe saw the story on a Tuesday morning news alert. She was sitting in the break room of a FreshMart on Cobb Parkway. A different FreshMart, in a different part of the city. Because that was one of the conditions of her new job. Entry-level, retail. The kind of work she had spent 20 years managing people who did. She had been there for 3 months. She had not complained once. Not because she had become a different person overnight, but because she was in the process, slowly and with considerable pain, of becoming one. The news alert read, 8 women file against former Perimeter College administrator in landmark Title IX case. She clicked it, read it. A had taped up above the microwave. A had taped up above the microwave. A sunrise over a mountain with the word perseverance in block letters. She thought about a grocery store line on a Tuesday afternoon in October. About a woman who had reached into her apron pocket and paid for a stranger's groceries with her lunch money. About what she, Vanessa, had said, the specific words. She still heard them sometimes in the specific hours of the night when sleep didn't come. Some of us have actual money. What is this? A homeless shelter? She had thought, in those first awful days after the video, that the worst thing was losing her job. Then she had thought the worst thing was the leased Mercedes being repossessed in her driveway while her neighbor watched. Then she had thought the worst thing was calling Trish and hearing the change in Trish's voice. The careful, managed distance of a friend doing the math of association. But sitting in a break room on Cobb Parkway on a Tuesday morning, reading about 8 women and a 93-page complaint, she understood that none of those things was the worst thing. The worst thing was that Zara Obi had been carrying all of that, the injustice, the grief, the 4 years of survival, on the day Vanessa had stood in a grocery store line and performed her contempt for an audience of strangers. And Zara had said nothing, had not defended herself, had not explained herself, had simply paid for a stranger's groceries and gone back to work. Vanessa picked up her phone, opened a browser, found the law firm's contact page, sat for a long time looking at it. Then she opened her email and wrote 3 sentences. She identified herself. She said she had witnessed Zara Obi's character under circumstances that she, Vanessa, had made deliberately difficult. She said she would be willing to provide a character statement to the court if it was of any use. She sent it before she could think about it longer. She went back to work. Her shift manager, a 23-year-old from Marietta who had never heard of Oriole Cosmetics, asked if she was okay because she looked like she'd been crying. "I'm fine," Vanessa said. "I'm good. Let's go." She was not fine, but she was, for the first time in 3 months, facing the right direction. The mediation was scheduled for a Wednesday. Kwan's lawyers had advised that Moss and the university would settle before trial. The evidence was too complete, the plaintiffs too credible, the story too public. They were right. By the third week of February, the university's legal team had made contact. By the fourth week, they were negotiating. Beck and Holloway had been clear from the first day. No settlement without full admission of institutional failure, public acknowledgement of each plaintiff by name, reinstatement of academic records and scholarships for all 8 women, and Dr. Reginald Moss's immediate removal from his position with a permanent bar from any role in student financial services at any institution. The university had counteroffered 3 times. Beck and Holloway had not moved an inch. This was, the lead attorney told Zara, because they had something most plaintiffs in cases like this never had. Documentation so thorough, it removed the possibility of ambiguity. 40 pages of grievance, 9 corroborating testimonies, a faculty witness willing to restore his statement, and a private investigator's report that showed the same pattern repeated across 5 years with military precision. The university agreed to all terms on the 4th counteroffer. Mediation was a formality, but an important one. Each plaintiff had chosen to attend in person. Zara had called them all the night before, individually, to ask if they were ready. 8 calls. 8 voices she had come to know over 6 weeks of evenings and phone calls and one Sunday afternoon at Priscilla's kitchen table in Smyrna, where they had all sat together for the first time, and Zara had looked around the room at 8 women who had survived the same thing separately and thought, this is what it costs when people stay silent. All this survival, all this isolation, all this lost time, when they should have found each other years ago. The night before the mediation, Zara sat on the edge of her couch in the Decatur apartment with Daisy asleep in the next room. She called her mother. It was 2 a.m. in Enugu, but her mother answered on the second ring, the way she always answered, as though she had been waiting. Mama. My daughter, you sound different. Do I? You sound... A pause. Her mother choosing the word carefully across the distance. Lighter. Something is different. Zara thought about how to explain it. The grocery store, the man with the empty pockets, the file, the 42nd floor and the table, and 6 weeks of evenings, and 8 women, and a retired professor in Savannah growing tomatoes. I'm coming home, she said instead. Soon, me and Adaze, we're coming to Enugu. Her mother's sharp intake of breath. Then a sound that was not a word. The sound of a woman who has been waiting for something so long, she had stopped naming it. How? Her mother managed. It's a long story, Mama. I'll tell you everything when I see you. Zara, are you okay? Yes, she said, and meant it fully, without the cushion she usually wrapped around the word. I'm okay. I'm actually okay. After she hung up, she sat in the quiet for a long time. The apartment felt different at night lately, not smaller, the same size. But she took up more of it. She had been, she understood, making herself smaller in it for years, moving through the rooms with the specific efficiency of a woman conserving something, not letting herself spread out, not letting herself take up the full space of a person who was allowed to rest. She let herself rest now. Tomorrow would come regardless. It would come, and she would be ready for it. The mediation was held in a conference room on the 21st floor of a law firm in Buckhead. Zara arrived with Priscilla and the other 6 women. They wore what they had chosen to wear, and no one had coordinated because no one needed to. They sat on one side of the table. The university's legal team sat on the other. Dr. Reginald Moss was not present. His attorney had advised against it, which told everyone in the room everything they needed to know about his confidence in his own position. Quan was not there either. He had offered. She had said no. This doesn't need you in the room, she had told him, not unkindly. It needs us in the room. That's the point. He had said, I know. I just wanted you to know the offer stood. She had said, I know. That's why I could say no. The mediation took 4 hours. The university's lead attorney read each concession aloud from a prepared document. Full admission of institutional failure in the handling of financial aid irregularities affecting the plaintiffs. Public acknowledgement of each plaintiff by name in a statement to be released within 48 hours. Reinstatement of academic records and scholarship eligibility for all 8 women, applicable immediately and retroactively. Restitution to each plaintiff to be negotiated individually with Beck and Holloway. And the permanent removal of Dr. Reginald Moss from his position, effective that morning, with a permanent bar from any student-facing financial role at any institution in the university system of Georgia. When the last item was read, the room was very quiet. Then Priscilla, beside Zara, exhaled, not a sigh. Something older than a sigh. The sound of a held breath released after 3 years of holding. One by one, around the table, the other women signed. Zara signed last. She held the pen for a moment before she put it to the page. Thought about August 14th, 2019. About a man with his hands folded on his desk, and the suggestion she had not, at first, understood. About the withdrawal letter. About Adesi's father leaving. About FreshMart and Gold Leaf and the earrings in the envelope, and the $47 and the $20 bill she had given to a stranger she thought had nothing. She signed. The pen made a quiet sound on the paper. Outside the 21st floor windows, Atlanta went about its business in the February cold, entirely unaware that 8 women had just gotten 4 years of their lives acknowledged, if not returned. Priscilla took Zara's hand under the table and squeezed it. Zara squeezed back. Neither of them said anything. There was nothing that needed saying. The university's statement went out at 4 p.m. on Thursday. It named each woman. It did not use the word mistake. Beck and Holloway had insisted on the specific language, institutional failure and deliberate obstruction of the appeals process. Both phrases were in the statement. The university had agreed to them without further negotiation, which suggested they had run the calculation and decided that the cost of fighting the language was higher than the cost of accepting it. Zara read the statement on her phone on her break at FreshMart. Standing in the break room by herself, her apron on, 40 minutes before the end of her shift. She read her own name in the statement, Zara Adayezi Obi, in an official document from a university that had taken her nursing degree and called it a recalculation. She read it twice, put her phone in her apron pocket, went back to register 4. Processed the rest of her shift. Gerald stopped her on the way out. He was holding a printout of the news story. Someone had printed it and left it on his desk, he said. He didn't know who. He looked at her with the expression of a man recalibrating something he thought he understood. Zara, he said, I didn't know. I know you didn't, she said. I should have. He stopped, started again. You deserved better than what this job offered you. I should have pushed harder for the raise. She looked at him, Gerald in his short-sleeved dress shirt, holding a printout, trying to say something real for possibly the first time in the 3 years she had worked for him. Yes, she said, I did. No softening, no making it easier for him. Just the truth, stated plainly, the way she stated all truths now. He nodded. He deserved that. She clocked out, walked to her car in the FreshMart parking lot. So sat for a moment with her hands on the steering wheel. She was going back to school in September. The scholarship reinstated and retro-funded. 2 semesters. She would graduate in the spring following. The nursing degree she had been 2 semesters from when a man had taken it from her. Adese would be 5 by then. Old enough to understand, in the way 5-year-olds understand things. Not the details, but the shape of it. Mama went back to school. Mama finished. She thought about calling Quan. She had his number, the direct one, the one on the card. She didn't call him. Not yet. She needed to sit with this alone first. Needed to let it be hers before it became a conversation. She drove home to Decatur, picked up a daze from Little Stars. Mrs. M. Ponce was closing up and said, "I heard about the news, Zara. We're proud of you." Zara said thank you and put a daze in the car and drove home and made egusi soup because it was the thing her mother made when something important had happened and the important thing deserved to be marked with food. She and Daisy ate at the small kitchen table. Daisy talked about a bird she had seen at daycare that had landed on the fence and stayed for a long time. "What kind of bird?" Zara asked. "A brown one," Daisy said seriously. "Big. Probably a hawk." "Why did it stay so long?" Zara thought about it. Maybe it was watching, making sure everything was okay before it moved on. Adez considered this with the gravity of a 4-year-old considering important information. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Zara looked at her daughter, at the dark, watchful eyes that were her father's, and the chin that was Ngozi's, and the rest that was entirely Daisy's own, assembled from pieces Zara could not account for and would not have predicted and loved beyond her capacity to describe. "Yes," she said. "Everything is okay." Adiz went back to her soup. Zara watched her eat and said nothing, and the kitchen was warm, and the egusi was her mother's recipe, and everything, for the first time in a long time, was exactly as large and as small as it needed to be. She called him that weekend. Saturday evening, Adaiz in bed, the apartment in its night quiet. Zara on the couch with the television off, which she had started doing more. Sitting without filling the silence, learning to be in a room without noise as company. He answered on the second ring. "Miss Obi." "Quan." She had been calling him Quan for 2 months now, and it still surprised him slightly. She could hear it, the small recalibration in the half-second before he responded. She had decided she liked that she could still surprise a man who had spent his life arranging things so nothing surprised him. "How are you?" he asked. "Good," she said. "Actually good. I made egusi." A pause. "Is that a marker of good days?" "In my house, yes." A beat of quiet. Comfortable, which was something she had not expected to happen, and which had happened anyway. The way things do when 2 people spend enough evenings being honest at the same table. "Thank you," she said. "I've been trying to figure out how to say it properly. I don't think there's a proper way, so I'm just saying it directly. Thank you." "You did the work," he said. "We did the work. You provided the table." "Miss Obi, Zara," she said. "After everything, Quan, my name is Zara." The pause that followed was the one she would remember longest. Not because of what came after it, but because of what was in it. A man who had built a world of controlled distance, quietly accepting, in a 2-second silence, the gift of being called something plain. "Zara," he said, first time. "You changed the shape of something I had decided was fixed. I don't know how to thank you for that. You don't need to thank me, just don't forget it." "I won't." "Good." A beat. "Also, I'm going back to school in September." "I know. And I'm going home. To Enugu, in April. Me in a daze." A longer pause. She could hear him recalibrating again, not with surprise, but with something more careful, processing what it meant. That she was going home. That she had not been in 3 years. That her mother was waiting. "How long have you been saving for that ticket?" he asked. She almost smiled. He always asked the real question. It was the thing about him she had come to respect most. "Since Adiz was born," she said. "A little from every check, the fund I never touched no matter what, even when I needed to touch everything else." Quiet. "Your mother is going to meet her granddaughter," he said. "Yes." Her voice, for the first time in the conversation, went slightly unsteady. "She's going to meet her granddaughter." She steadied it. She was good at steadying things. "Take good care of yourself, Quan." "You too, Zara." She hung up. The apartment was quiet. Outside, Decatur hummed with the ordinary sounds of a Saturday night going about its business. She sat for a while in the quiet, not filling it, just sitting in it, taking up the full space of it. A woman who had survived on $147 a month and sold her mother's earrings and given her lunch money to a stranger and kept a folder for 4 years and sat at a table with a billionaire and told him what to do and meant every word. A woman going home. The hand that is always closed has nothing to offer and nothing to receive. Ngozi Obi, Enugu. Here is what actually happened at Register 4 on October 14th. A woman with $147 to her name and a sick mother overseas and a daughter who drew horses that looked like dogs reached into her apron pocket and paid $19.84 for a stranger's groceries. That is the small version. That is what fit in the 15-second phone clip that accumulated 4.2 million views and trended under a hashtag, and got a woman fired, and a man investigated, and a story told in break rooms and church halls and group chats in a dozen cities. But here is the large version. A woman who had been made to feel like she had no power proved in a single unrehearsed gesture that power has nothing to do with what is in your wallet. A man who had spent 20 years writing checks from the overflow discovered in a grocery store on Flat Shoals Road the difference between giving from abundance and giving from an empty hand. He had funded 17 schools and a dozen programs and a hospital wing and never once been changed by any of it. $20.84 changed him in ways that $4 billion had not. 8 women who had survived the same injustice in isolated silence found each other because one woman kept a folder. Not because she had a plan, not because she had resources, because she refused to let the truth disappear just because no one was ready to hold it yet. A woman who had performed her contempt in a grocery store and lost everything she had built on top of that contempt: the car, the job, the friends, the self-image, found herself, 3 months later, writing 3 sentences to a law firm and going back to work and facing, slowly and with considerable pain, the version of herself she had been pretending not to be. A retired professor who had made a wrong choice in a hallway and spent 3 years growing tomatoes and not sleeping well, finally put his statement back in the file. It was not enough to undo what he had done. He knew that. It was what was left to him, and he gave it. None of these things were planned. None of them were engineered. They were the consequence of one woman deciding, on a Tuesday afternoon, to reach into her pocket for someone she did not know. Not because she expected anything from it. Not because she thought anyone was watching. Not because she had calculated the return. Because he was embarrassed. Because he needed food. Because she had money. Because that, in the end, was enough of a reason. Had always been enough of a reason. Had always been, her mother had told her, and her mother's mother before that, the only reason that was ever needed. Zara Obi landed in Enugu on a Tuesday in April. She had a daze on her hip and 1 checked bag and her carry-on and the specific kind of exhaustion that only comes from a transatlantic flight with a 4-year-old. She walked through arrivals and through the familiar wall of heat and diesel and dust a noise that was Enugu's particular atmosphere. The smell of home that you only understand is the smell of home when you've been away from it long enough to forget it, and then suddenly remember it all at once. Her mother was waiting at the barrier. Ngozi Obi was 61 years old and smaller than Zara remembered. The diabetes had taken something. The years had taken something. But her eyes were the same. Sharp and warm and amused and full of the specific intelligence of a woman who had sold fish in a market for 30 years and read people's characters in 30 seconds and raised a daughter who had gone to America and survived everything America could throw at her and come back standing. Adez saw her grandmother and went very still, the way children go still when they encounter something too large for their existing categories. Then she reached out both arms. Ngozi took her. Zara stood in the arrivals hall of Enugu Akanu Ibiam International Airport and watched her mother hold her daughter for the first time and did not try to manage what happened to her face. She had been managing her face for a long time. She let it go. After a moment, Ngozi looked up at her over Adesi's shoulder. Her eyes were wet. Zara's were wet. They looked at each other across 4 years and $10,000 of insulin and 2 jobs and a folder and a grocery store on Flat Shoals Road and everything that had happened between the woman who left and the woman who came back. "You look lighter," her mother said. Zara laughed. The sound of it surprised her. Full, unguarded, taking up the full space of the arrivals hall without apology. "You said that on the phone. It's still true now that I can see you?" Ngozi shifted a daze on her hip, the practiced gesture of a woman who had carried children her whole life, and looked at her daughter with the look that had no name, the look that was only ever exchanged between a mother and a child who had survived something together from opposite sides of an ocean. "Tell me everything," Ngozi said. Zara picked up her bags. "All of it?" "All of it." They walked out of the airport together into the Enugu afternoon. The heat hit them like a wall, and Adeze looked up at the sky with the expression of someone filing important information about the world, and Ngozi held her, and Zara held her bags, and the city spread out around them, loud and bright and chaotic and alive. And Zara began to talk. She talked about a grocery store, about a man with empty pockets, about a woman in a silk blouse who had said things she would have to live inside for a long time, about a business card that said 4 words, about coffee at Alma's and a 42nd floor and a table big enough to spread papers out on, about 8 women and a retired professor in a law firm and a Monday morning in January when a 93-page complaint was filed in Fulton County Superior Court. She talked about the things that had been taken from her, and the things that had been given back, and the things that had never been gone, only stored in a folder in the back of a drawer, waiting. She talked all the way to her mother's house. She talked through lunch and into the afternoon, and when she finally stopped, her mother was quiet for a moment. Then Ngozi said, in Igbo, which was the language she used when she wanted to be sure a thing landed correctly, "The hand that gives is never truly empty. It is always in the process of being filled." Adez, who understood no Igbo but understood tone completely, looked at her grandmother and said, "What does that mean?" "It means," Zara said, switching back to English, looking at her daughter in the particular yellow afternoon light of Enugu, "that when you help someone, not because you'll get something for it, not because anyone is watching, just because they need it and you have it, something comes back. Not always, right away. Not always in the form you expect. But something comes back." Eddie's thought about this with her full 4-year-old gravity. "Like the hawk?" she said. "The one that stayed to watch?" Zara looked at her daughter. She thought about a store on Flat Shoals Road. About a man who had come looking for something real and had found it. About 8 women in a room in Buckhead signing their names. About a folder kept for 4 years in a drawer. About the things that stay, the things that wait. The things that were always there, watching, making sure everything was okay before moving on. Yes, she said softly, like the hawk. A truly generous person gives from an empty hand. Zara Obi graduated with her nursing degree the following spring. She was 31 years old. Adaze was in the front row in a yellow dress, sitting next to a woman named Priscilla, who had driven up from Smyrna, and a retired professor from Savannah, who had taken the long drive because some things require your physical presence, and he understood that now. She did not invite Sung Jin Kwan to the graduation. She called him the evening after and told him about it instead. He listened, asked 2 questions, said, "Your mother would have been proud." She said, "She was watching. I could feel it." Ngozi Obi had died in November, peacefully, in her own house. Could. Zara had been there. She had made could. Zara had been there. She had made it in time. This is the part of the story that is hard to carry, but it is part of the story. The full version insists on being carried whole. Kwan established the Ngozi Obi Scholarship Fund 6 months after Zara's graduation. Fully funded. 10 awards annually to Black women in nursing programs across Georgia who are returning students, meaning women who had to stop and start again, meaning women who had kept a folder. The scholarship required no essay, only a letter, in the applicant's own words, about why they came back. He named it without asking Zara first. This was the one time he acted without her permission. When she found out, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "That's the one time I'll let it go." He said nothing, but she heard, across the phone, something that might have been the seal finally breaking. Something that might have been, in a man who had spent 47 years building walls against it, the sound of being moved. She let him have it. Some things don't need words. Some things are better left in the space between people, where they can breathe. Register 4 is still at FreshMart on Flat Shoals Road. A different cashier works it now. Young woman, maybe 22. Earbuds in one ear, fast hands, a smile she gives automatically and means about half the time, which is more than most people manage. She does not know what happened at her register on a Tuesday in October. Nobody put up a plaque. Nobody marked it. But somewhere in the institutional memory of that ordinary neighborhood store, in the break room, conversations, and the Gerald tells it at every staff meeting story, and the way the older regulars sometimes stop at that register specifically, the ones who were there that day, who watched and said nothing and have thought about it since, something of it remains. The way things remain when they are true, not loudly, not with a headline, just there, quietly present. The way the most important things always are. Subscribe and turn on notifications not to miss our next story. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this moved you, pass it on. Someone needs to hear it.